another Marvel insider providing some insight on what exactly is going on with the MCU. It feels strange. Well, there's apparently two big reasons for that. China, I guess, was the original reason, and then the hubris or the ego of Kevin Feige. It's all explained by this insider who sent this information directly to WDW Pro. This site does tend to deal more in rumor and speculation, but the source seems pretty valid, and when you hear what they have to say, I think it's actually quite insightful as to what's going on inside of Marvel Studios with the MCU. It kind of all makes sense when you hear this from the insider themselves, but take it with a grain of salt. You can believe it if you'd like, you could not believe it if you don't like. I think you'll have a new understanding of what's wrong with Marvel. It's not just you, it's not just me. There is something rotten at the core of Marvel. First up, they talk about China being the original problem. Marvel is dead in China, is what the insider said. Not the brand, the sales. The Chinese government want the biggest movies made in China playing in China. But that was the big driving force behind Marvel's strategy for a decade. We were supposed to get to finish the Infinity Stone saga, saturate Western markets, then growth was in Beijing. Now we're locked out. So we now have to find a new place to grow. That's why we pushed hard into diversity. Chinese box office was absolutely a driving force with the global box office receipts of the MCU itself. We're always seeing this tremendous growth as far as the box office of the MCU, but the domestic growth wasn't nearly as big because so much growth was actually happening in the Chinese market. That was going to be the biggest movie market in the world someday. I think COVID probably pushed that down the line a few years, but China is an absolute big time player, and Marvel Studios being shut out of the Chinese market destroyed their strategy, so they had to go in a new direction, diversity. It's what we've been seeing really in phase 4 of the MCU when you look at the shows on Disney Plus and with what we're seeing in movie theaters themselves. They go on to explain how this is killing the Marvel Studios brand, the MCU. Diversity at Marvel doesn't mean what you think it means. It isn't races and religions and disabilities. Diversity is equal with representation. We don't do Christians or Jews. We don't do strong white male leads in heroic spots. It's not that those are bad at Marvel going forward. It's that we're told we already have the market for those groups. We're told behaviors are representation. It's not enough to have diversity based on background. We have to have diversity based on the way people act. Why do you think She-Hulk is how it is? They're trying to create a new Marvel market for neo-feminist women. This is something I addressed just a couple of days ago here on the channel about why some people might not be liking She-Hulk so much, because it's not really a superhero show. It's Sex and the City, like in the Marvel Comics universe. And a lot of superhero fans of the MCU themselves, really aren't going to the MCU for that. But that's the entertainment that they're receiving, and it feels off. It feels off-putting. But apparently, it doesn't matter what MCU fans actually want. They don't think they need to court us anymore. They don't need to entertain their actual fans because you're going to stick around. We're all going to stick around until they figure this all out. They grow their brand to include all these new demographics, and then maybe we can have a movie again. Not many stories about heroism, but a lot of stories about everything else because they want to be everything to everybody. And when you try to do that, when you try to please everyone, you end up pleasing no one. And I think that's really the rough spot the Marvel Cinematic Universe is in right now and what they're experiencing, all the failures one after another. The source goes on to explain that Kevin Feige's hubris is really at the heart of this. We're trying to grow in every direction all at once and have the belief old fans will stick with it through all of this. But that isn't the case. They know it and can't hide it. The flops have been gigantic embarrassments. People aren't turning to Disney Plus to get the Marvel shows the way it was planned. Same time, they aren't willing to change because this is Feige's strategy, and it is all about his ego. Feige thinks he can hold out long enough to build the new markets with all the DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion on screen. Then he thinks he can buy back the old fans with a huge spending spree for the multiverse stuff. Well, he does have a point there because we saw Spider-Man No Way Home, right? Why did that movie make over $1 billion? Why is that one of the most successful movies in the history of the North American box office? Because they went out and had a spending spree. They showed us a bunch of stuff that we thought we wanted, and we took it hook, line, and sinker. But that's not really what the Marvel Cinematic Universe is. But they needed a big hit, and they gave us the fan service that they believe in the end will bring us all back. When they bring Robert Downey Jr. back in as Iron Man, when they bring back Chris Evans as Captain America, and we see the old team get back together, probably Scarlett Johansson as Black Widow as well. That's in the future. We're going to get that eventually when they realize that they've salted the earth the fields of the MCU so much that nobody wants to go see their movies, they'll throw that stuff in there, just like they did with Spider-Man, and we'll all come back. Is that the case? Will people be able to hold out long enough and have enough faith in what Kevin Feige is doing to come back for the fan service itself? I'm not really sure. We saw what happened to Doctor Strange, a lot of fan service in that one. We've seen what happened with Thor, Love and Thunder. Even the established Marvel Cinematic heroes that we all know and love that have been big box office moneymakers are starting to fail now. If you look at Love and Thunder, it way underperformed in comparison to Ragnarok. If you look at the drop-off associated with Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, it's absolutely staggering how quickly a lot of these movies are failing once people realize it's not exactly what they wanted. But then you get Spider-Man No Way Home. Not only does it blow up, it ends up being the highest grossing movie on Labor Day weekend, 8 months after it actually came out. Absolutely staggering stuff. But I don't think he understands just how much he's turned off his buying audience at this point. Yes, they'll come back here and then, but I don't think really there's any faith left in the Marvel Cinematic Universe as a whole right now for a vast majority of the hardcore fans that were going out there. The Insider also talks about Bob Chapek, the CEO of Disney, and why he can't get this thing under control and rein Feige in. Bob Chapek says he wants to get the company out of politics. Company policy is coming. Everybody knows it, but Bob doesn't want out of the politics the way you guys think. He wants Disney out of policy, but he wants to go hard at the representation we talk about. Even if he wants Disney out of political sausage making, he still wants into the alphabet issues. He wants into behavior stuff. That's where they believe the new markets are. They want minority Disney Plus ratios up. They want single women merch sales up. And this is one of the strategies that is absolutely going to blow up in their face. This is a stick of Acme Dynamite waiting to blow up on all of Disney. Disney, for years upon years, has been the place you go for family entertainment, no matter who you are. And there's always going to be something there. There's going to be a couple jokes that the adults get, but the content itself is going to be safe for kids and wholesome. But we're seeing them dive into this alphabet politics stuff and really changing the scope and narrative of the entertainment that they're providing to children nowadays. They are absolutely playing with fire, and Bob Chapek is making an enormous mistake diving into this stuff. He doesn't want to be political. He doesn't want to be a part of policy making. He doesn't want to have to speak up about that, but he absolutely wants to shove representation into the Disney product and trying to change the behavior of kids. I think we can all see that one. Another issue apparently is nepotism with Bob Chapek. If you really want to know how Bob has kept hands off on Marvel, even though Thor came in under desires, you need to know the thing looking you right in the face. Feige has a Chapek at his side. Bob's son, Brian Chapek, has been accelerated up the company. He was a major producer on Thor 4. It pisses off so many people at the studio because it's blatant nepotism, but it keeps Bob at bay, and Brian is totally on board with everything Feige is about. Nepotism has brought down many an empire when it comes to entertainment, and Bob Chapek trying to support a son who's firmly in the pocket of Kevin Feige is going to be a bad strategy in the end. You need to understand when things are veering off course so you can correct it and get the thing going back in a successful direction. Eventually, Feige is going to mess this thing up so bad, you probably can't go back to the MCU until maybe you take a decade off and then do a reboot. You might alienate every fan that goes to your movies at some point, and it feels like there's a good chance Kevin Feige is headed down that direction. Yes, there are still very hardcore MCU fans out there. Yes, there are people on Twitter that don't actually watch the movies that will shout down everyone that actually paid to go see the movies for having an issue or criticizing them because they're trying to please every audience in the world but the one that actually wants them. But eventually, your chickens do come home to roost. We've seen this in a lot of places associated with the MCU. Right now, their toy line is absolutely failing across the board. Recently, a Toy Insider actually reached out to WDW Pro, and I think that's one of the reasons that this actually came out, and talked about how Marvel Studios, the MCU action figures, are just failing left and right, and why they won't stop it. Definitely check this out if you didn't see this the first time, or maybe you want to check it out again. Also, if you're on a mobile device, there's a link in the video description if you want to check it out there.